Welcome to the Max Future Weekly Podcast. All Apple talk and no chit chat.
Okay, welcome to the Apple Podcast, episode 102. Hey, today is December 30th, 2011, and we're fast approaching the last day of the year. And I've actually missed a couple of weeks of this podcast because I had a terrible cough. I just couldn't get rid of the cough, so I couldn't really do this podcast the last 2 weeks. So my apologies, but illness kicked in. I had this bad virus, and my chest was just coughing all the time. So anyways, but I am here, and I'm a little better. I'm still coughing a little bit, but I'm able to do this last Apple podcast, number 102, for 2011. So thanks for listening. Sorry I've been away. And again, this is Lex at the maxfuture.com blog. And here we go. So let's see if I can get through it. Okay, so 2011 is winding down for Apple and Apple fans. And, it's been a very interesting year. And over at TechCrunch, MG Seigler has a nice roundup of everything that really happened in Apple land in the last year in a post that he calls Apple's Terrific and Tumultous 2011. And, looking at his post, he's right. A lot has happened, and it was kind of interesting. Like, for example, let's go quickly through the year. I'm not going to repeat everything he's saying in his blog post because it's very, very detailed, and I'll have a link to it on the show notes. But he points out, for example, it was in January of last year, 2011, or the beginning of this year, that the Mac App Store officially opened. And that was like a major thing because really it's the end of the optical disc. And I really like the Mac App Store. I like the fact that you can just update all your apps, non-Apple apps that you buy through there, as well as Apple apps right through the Mac App Store. And I get a little annoyed when you can't buy an app through the App Store. So that came out on January 6th of last year. Also, if we recall, in January of last year, or this past year, Verizon announced that the Verizon iPhone was finally coming out, and it was the iPhone 4. That was on January 7th. And then, of course, Steve Jobs took a medical leave, his final medical leave, really, from Apple on January 17th. So that was very significant. In February, we got closer to the iPad 2 and the iPad 2 rumors. I remember that was a very exciting time. It seems so long ago, but it really was just the beginning of the year. And shortly after that, in March, Apple announced that the iPad 2 was coming out. Steve Jobs showed up for that. And that was a big event. And to recall, it was early. I thought it was going to be in April. The iPad 2 was going to be, on sale, and it went on sale on March 11th. So that was pretty cool. I remember it was kind of cold waiting in line that day. It was a Friday, and the iPad 2, boy, that thing sell. I remember I bought two and sold one online, and I got a nice little markup on it and help subsidize my selling, the first iPad and then getting the iPad 2. And of course there was also, information out that iOS 5 was going to come out in the fall, but that's like the smaller news. The big news was really that, the iPad 2 came out in March. And then throughout the year, Apple was just sort of really having incredible earnings every quarter. In April, Apple announced huge profits, revenue of $24.67 billion. That was just a huge amount of revenue and sales of the iPad and the iPhone and the iMac. Then in May, the iMacs were updated, and as we got closer to WWDC, there people started talking about iCloud. And then in June, we had the WWDC keynote where Lion was unveiled, and the final version of Lion. Lion was unveiled earlier, and then iOS 5 and iCloud, and also iTunes Match, iMessage, Newsstand, the Twitter iOS 5 integration. All of that was announced. And what else? I mean, the patent wars were sort of going. And then in July, Apple had again another great quarter, announced massive earnings. Let's see, and Apple stock broke $400 a share for the first time, which was huge. And Lion finally came out in July. People started getting the final version of Lion. And then in August, let's see, Apple's market cap passed Exxon, which was just pretty amazing. So it became the most valuable public company in the world, in the publicly traded company. Also during this time, it became clear that Steve Jobs' biography was going to be pushed up to November, and there was talk that the next iPhone will have a dual-core chip. And then in September, the iPhone 5 rumors, were going around. But then there was a big October 4 event where they unveiled the iPhone 4S, and Siri was sort of revealed, as well as Find My Friends. And the iPhone 4 price went down to $99. And remember, the next day, Steve Jobs died. So that was just, I remember, a shocking 2-day thing where there was this Apple event. Steve Jobs wasn't there. It was a big deal. The iPhone 4S was announced. And then the next day, Steve Jobs died, which was really kind of a blow to everybody who really is a fan of Apple or like what Apple does and really likes what Steve Jobs was doing over the years. And, it was kind of a moving period during that October period. And then the iOS 5 was released on October 12th. The iPhone 4S went on sale. Apple announced its quarterly results. And they missed Wall Street's expectations, although they met Apple's guidance. And so the stock price went down a little bit, but then it rebounded. And then let's see, in November, let's see, what was the big news in November? Oh, iTunes Match finally launched on November 14th. I think that has a lot of potential. I just like to see it work more smoothly. I've been using it. And then I guess in November we had rumors of a MacBook Air 15-inch model coming. And then in December, really just sort of milestones. Apple announced 100 million downloads from the Mac App Store. And, there are rumors now that the iPad 3 is coming. So that's basically the highlights of the year. MG Seigler does a very nice job in his post in giving more detail to that, but that's pretty much what he's highlighting as the big stuff, and I think he's pretty right about that. It was a very interesting year. I mean, we had all sorts of interesting stuff happen. All sorts of good products came out, like the iPad 2, I would say, was the biggie. And then the iPhone 4S, I think, is a biggie, as well as Siri. So there was great stuff this year. Okay, so one of the nicer stories to sort of end the year on is that word comes from BBC that Jonathon Ive, Apple's head designer, has been awarded a knighthood from Great Britain, from the Queen of the United Kingdom. And this is really quite an honor if you think about it. I mean, he's a designer of computer products, and he's going to get a knighthood, which is, a very high honor in England and United Kingdom. And, a little bit of his background. I mean, he's been with Apple since, I guess, the early 90s. He started Apple in 92 during the period when Steve Jobs wasn't there. And he really started to flourish when Steve Jobs came back. And Steve Jobs, I guess, recognized him. Steve Jobs said to his biographer that, he considered Ive a kindred spirit. This was someone who Steve Jobs described as his, quote, spiritual partner. So, he's a crucial part of the company, and hopefully he'll stay there. But, he's originally from Great Britain. He was raised in Chingford, it says here. And let's see, he was born in 1967. So that makes him, what does that make him? I guess that makes him about 45 years old. So, he still has many years left to work. So it's quite an honor. I mean, a lot of the beauty of Apple products, I think, comes from Johnny Ives. I mean, I have a beautiful 11-inch MacBook Air. I really love it, and it's just beautifully designed. It just, fine lines, beautiful metal. The same with the iPad and the iPad 2 and the iPhone. So this guy is the guy behind it. So congratulations to him, and cheers. Okay, so, for people who want to study Apple in the future, there's good news. And the AP News revealed that Stanford University has a huge archive of material regarding Apple's origins that Apple turned over to Stanford in the late 90s, soon after Jobs returned. Apparently, Apple had been saving stuff in the hopes of creating a company museum. And it says here there were all sorts of things, including in-house videos of company employees in the mid-'80s. And apparently, Apple decided to turn it over to Stanford in 1997. And they, Stanford took trucks full of documents, books, software, videotapes, and they have a collection. And the collection was sort of revealed by Stanford to the AP News, and the AP News got to look at some of this stuff. And it's some warehouse that Stanford has, and the AP News is not revealing the location as agreed to, because obviously there's a lot of interest in the early days of Apple now by historians, people who want to write biographies and such like that. But it sounds like there's a treasure trove of interesting stuff. The AP News says, they saw one thing was an interview they saw of Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs recalling a seminal moment in Silicon Valley history. And in the video, they have Wozniak saying, "I remember driving down Highway 85. We were on the freeway, and Steve mentions, I've got a name, Apple Computer. We kept thinking of other alternatives to the name, and we couldn't think of anything better," end quote. So there's all these like in-house videos and other memorabilia. I think it's very cool. I think, Stanford should open this up, let biographers and historians have at it, and maybe we'll learn more interesting stuff about the early days of Apple. Apparently, among the stuff is a company video spoofing the 1984 movie Ghostbusters, and with Steve Jobs and other executives playing Blue Busters, a reference to IBM. Other interesting stuff are the 1976 agreement for a $5,000 loan to Apple and its three co-founders, and also a letter written by a printer who had just met Steve Jobs and Wozniak and warns his colleagues about the young entrepreneurs. The printer says, quote, "This joker Jobs is going to be calling you. They are two guys. They build kits, operate out of a garage." So it's kind of fascinating, that there's this little trove of records at Stanford, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about it in the future. Speaking of old times, in recent days, a former Apple employee, Andy Hertzfeld, has posted on Google Plus this picture that he had from a long time ago in the 80s of Steve Jobs standing in New York City, I guess at the IBM building, under an IBM sign, and lifting his right hand and giving his middle finger, to IBM. Now, I think maybe Hertzfeld revealed this because there had been a little to-do on Google Plus. MG Seigler in his Google Plus profile picture was flipping the bird, and Google censored him. But then Andy Hertzfeld just sort of circulated this very cool picture of Steve Jobs giving IBM the finger. And back then, in the 80s, IBM was the big threat to personal computing and to Apple. So it makes sense that, he'd have some animosity to IBM. Okay, so Christmas has come and gone. So let me tell you a little bit about my Apple-related shopping for the family and stuff. Now, one purchase that I'm really happy about, and my wife is really happy about, is this speaker that I got called iHome from, I guess, iHome. And it's the IW1. And what's cool about it is that it works with AirPlay. So, and it has a built-in rechargeable battery and a base that charges it. And so it can be portable. You can take it from room to room. And it sounds great. It's got a really good bass sound. Now, I thought about getting the more expensive speaker that Apple sells that it's like $500 or $600. This one, the suggested retail price is $299. I think I got it for less, like $240 or so. I got it at Best Buy, and it's great. I mean, first of all, AirPlay works really well with it. You can stream Pandora from like your iPhone or your iPad, but you can also just hook it up directly to it. So there's two different modes, and I don't know, it just sounds great. So, it fills whatever room we have it in with really rich sound. So I'm very pleased with this purchase, and I would recommend it to people. It's an easy to set up. There's actually an app you download on your iPhone, and you connect it by USB to the IW1, and it sets up the IW1 on your local Wi-Fi network. So if you have an encrypted Wi-Fi network that you need the password, the easiest way to set it up is download the free app from iHome on your iPhone, connect by USB to the speaker, and then it just tells you right there, like, hey, what network do you want the speaker to be on? I even took it with me on vacation, and it works well, so I highly recommend this IW1 from iHome. I mean, for me, the sound is very good, and it's a decent price, so check it out. Okay, so one product that I kind of regret getting, and I got it for my daughter, is this. I bought it from Apple's website, and it actually came in time for Christmas. But it was an impulse buy. I thought she'd kind of like it, and I got the Disney Spotlight digital wireless mic and karaoke app. And it's kind of hefty. It's like $99.95. It's kind of expensive. And what it is, it's a wireless microphone that works with this like dongle that you dock into the iPad's USB, proprietary USB connection. And it allows you to like wirelessly do karaoke to a free app that has some free songs with it. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of annoyed because it comes in this Disney packaging. It's the kind of packaging that it's impossible to open, and once you open it, there's no way you can put it back cleanly into the packaging. Obviously, I think it's kind of sleazy, frankly, and I'm kind of surprised that Apple sells this. I know they have a relationship with Disney, but it's kind of sleazy because it first of all, it feels really cheap. The microphone, I mean, for $99, the microphone feels really cheap. They didn't even give you batteries with the microphone. I mean, it costs $100, and they didn't give you batteries, and it's just a really cheap microphone that's supposed to work like wirelessly with this dongle. And I'm surprised with Apple. Apple packages things beautifully, and they sell this junk from Disney. And I'm tempted to return it. The packaging is sort of destroyed because in opening it, you destroy it. And I don't know. It's just one of the things that annoyed me with the app is that it doesn't work with AirPlay. So when you've got this microphone and the app working, and it's supposed to be karaoke, you can't use AirPlay to just sort of wirelessly stream it if you have an iPad 2 to the TV. Instead, they want you to connect this dongle, has a VGA out, like one of the old-fashioned video out cable slots, and you're supposed to connect that to the TV, and just a regular audio line out to your TV, which is really like old technology, and it's crazy that this app would work with this old technology. So I highly recommend you do not buy this because it's a cheap microphone, and it's kind of stupid that it doesn't work with AirPlay. And I don't know. It's just it's too expensive for what it is, and I really regret it. And they give you very sort of some crummy music for free, and then the rest you have to buy from High School Musical, from Camp Rock, and I don't know. It's just a really stupid product. It's not well made, and actually you can use, I guess you can use, like if you have a USB mic that works with the iPad, you can use that with the program. So we'll have to see. I'm going to probably give it a bad review. Now, another product that I got that's also sold on the Apple Store is something called the Disney Cars 2 AppMates by Spin Master, McQueen and Holly Shiftwell. Basically, there are these little kits. What these are these like little cars that have something little underneath them, these teeny little cars, and you plop them on top of an iPad, I guess an iPad 2, and they work with an app that relates to the Cars 2 movie. And you hold the car down on the surface of the iPad 2, and it interacts with the app and drives around this sort of virtual world of Radiator Springs. So, it takes a little getting used to. You got to hold it down and sort of keep it in the center, and then the app sort of speaks to you. But, it is kind of fun. And my son, who is 7 years old, he kind of enjoys it. And it's not too expensive. It retails for $19.95. I think I got it for less. I think I got it like at Best Buy for like $15 or something like that, or $14. And it's kind of cool. It literally, it's like this object. You get two cars, and I guess the different kits come with different cars from the movie Cars, and they're very small. I'd say like an inch and a half, maybe 2 inches in length. And you hold them down, and if you look on the bottom of them, they have like some sort of something that allows the iPad to sense it. So it's kind of cool, and it's not too expensive. And I wonder if we're going to see more of these sort of things that can interact with the surface of the iPad 2. And, I wonder if we'll see board games where maybe, you use actual pieces that are something that senses the iPad 2 surface, and then you move it around. I don't know. I mean, I think we're going to see all sorts of crazy things. So I would recommend this. I think it's kind of interesting if you have an iPad 2 or an iPad. Check it out. Okay, so how is Apple doing in the iOS world? Well, the MacObserver.com website reported on some data that came out from ComScore regarding, how the phones are doing. And basically, the bottom line is that Apple's share of the mobile hardware and software market is rising, according to the Mac Observer story. So basically, the winners are Android and iOS. And it says here that Samsung is now the leading manufacturer of mobile phones, and Android is the leading OS for smartphones. And Apple's second ranked share of OS market grew during the period. And then the ones who had declines were Nokia's Symbian, Microsoft, and RIM. So the BlackBerry is going down. So, I guess this is good news for Apple. Apple's share is, where is it? It's like, 8 or 9%. It says Apple was the only manufacturer to show a gain during this time, rising 1.4 points to a fourth place to 11.2% share. In the smartphone market, let's see, Apple has a share of over 25%, while Google's Androids have almost 50% of the market. And so Apple and Google are now 1 and 2, and Symbian is almost non-existent. Microsoft is almost non-existent. And RIM, BlackBerry, is just declining quickly. So, but I'll tell you, like with Android, I think what's going on with Android is simply that there's just a lot of cheap Android phones out. And a lot of the carriers can offer, Android phones for a penny upgrade. And I guess it should be interesting to see what happens in the United States in the coming quarter, because now Apple has a penny or a dollar upgrade with a contract smartphone in the iPhone 3GS. But until recently, Apple didn't have that. And I think what, a lot of people, were going to Android One because they couldn't get the iPhone on their carrier, because up until recently it wasn't on Sprint. Up until recently it wasn't on Verizon, really, until the beginning of the year. And it's still not on T-Mobile. So if you're on T-Mobile and you want a smartphone, what are you going to do? You're going to buy an Android phone. Until recently, if you were on Sprint and wanted a smartphone, what are you going to do? You're going to buy an Android phone, and the same with Verizon. But I think the tide's going to be turning in terms of what kind of market share in the United States Android has with the iPhone, as the iPhone becomes available in cheaper upgrade costs and available on all 4 carriers. I wouldn't be surprised if T-Mobile soon gets an iPhone. So anyways, interesting data from ComScore and the Mac Observer. Okay, so here are my predictions for Apple in 2012. Okay, the first prediction is I think we're going to have a 15-inch MacBook Air. The MacBook Air is clearly the hottest selling Mac there is. Everybody wants one. Well, right now we have a 13-inch MacBook Air and an 11-inch MacBook Air. And clearly this is the future of Macintoshes, because they're brilliant. One, they are very light, they're very thin, they're very portable, and they're very fast because they have these SSD drives, which are much better than the traditional hard drives. And they're transformative. It makes having a computer just zippy fast. And so for everyday people, a MacBook Air is the way to go. And I could see having a little heavier, bigger 15-inch MacBook Air because people want the screen size. And, let's say it comes in at 3 pounds. It's still going to be super light. And I think there's going to be great demand for it, even if there's trade-offs, even though, let's say, it doesn't have anything other than a Thunderbolt port and a USB port. Well, that's fine, because the Thunderbolt port in the future, there'll be products that will allow the super fast port to be used with historical, devices that are, let's say, FireWire 800 or eSATA. So definitely, I think we're going to see in 2012 a 15-inch MacBook Air. Also, I think we're going to see a third-generation Apple TV. And this is where it gets kind of dicey. At a minimum, we're going to see the same sort of incarnation of the Apple TV, the second generation, but with a faster processor. I guess it uses a A4 chip, the current Apple TV 2, and we know that there's an A5 chip in the iPad 2 and the iPhone 4S, so maybe we'll see an Apple TV with an A5 chip or even an A6 chip if that's what the iPad 2 is going to have. So it'll have a faster processor. And what I'd like to see, and hopefully this will come in 2012, is open up the Apple TV for developers. Maybe they'll do it like sort of limited APIs that are designed to enhance the apps that work on the iPhone and the iPad. Maybe there'll be some sort of API where you can only create apps that work together with an iOS device. So for games, let's say, or for media. So, and then, what a lot of people are speculating is by the end of the year, maybe Apple will reveal a version of the Apple TV where there's an actual Apple TV embedded in a big screen television. And I think that's going to come. I think there is a market. I think people will pay for the design of a beautifully designed Apple television that's 37 inches or 42 inches or 50 inches and that has the Apple TV built into it. So at a minimum, I think people will pay for that. They'll pay for the design, and they'll also pay for the convenience of having the Apple TV embedded in it. Now, people are still going to want to be able to hook up like an antenna or satellite or cable to the TV. What I would like is, one of the things that drives me crazy now is when I want to use my Apple TV with my TV, I have to use the remote for my TV to switch the input for the TV from cable to the Apple TV's HDMI input. And what would be nice about an Apple TV where the TV itself was from Apple is if Apple does something so that when you want to use AirPlay, you don't have to switch like a button or anything. If you're on cable television and you launch AirPlay, it'll just switch to AirPlay, pulling away from cable television automatically through the software. I think that would be great because, one of the annoying things about using AirPlay when you have a regular TV with cable television is you got to go out of your way to switch the input of the TV to Apple TV and then launch AirPlay. So, I'd pay a premium for a TV like that. So I think that's one of the things we're going to see. Then also, we're definitely going to see a new iPad. We're going to see an iPad 3 come out. It'll probably come out in March, The iPad 2 came out in March. And what are we going to see in the iPad 3? Well, it's going to have a Retina display, or at least there'll be a version of it with a Retina display, which is going to be more pixels per square inch. And I wouldn't be surprised if the high-end iPad 3 has storage of up to 128 gigabytes. Maybe the more expensive one. I think there's going to be a longer-lasting battery in the iPad 3. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think Apple's always working on battery technology, and I don't think Apple's going to come out with a 7-inch iPad. I don't think they care about Amazon's $200 Kindle Fire. I played around with the Kindle Fire, I think at a Radio Shack or a Staples or something like that. And I got to tell you, it's not a good experience, because one of the things that I noticed right away with the Kindle Fire is that when you're flicking around with the touch on it, it doesn't work very well. There's a lag, there's a hesitation, there's a hiccup. It's not smooth. With the iPad, you don't feel like, oh, I'm swiping and then I have to wait a second for something to happen. It's instantaneous. Like you're touching the screen feels like you're actually moving the screen. And if there's any sort of like lag, then that's a poor experience. What else? I think we're definitely going to see Siri, which is this great voice recognition and sort of artificial intelligence on the iPhone 4S. I think we're going to see that come to the iPhone 4. We're going to see that come to the iPad 2. We're going to see that come to the iPad 3. And I bet you it even comes to the Macintoshes. And I also think they're going to have Siri expand it to work with apps, so that it works with not only the Wolfram Alpha app, but it also works with like all the apps on your iPhone or iPad or Mac. And I think what they're going to do is release a Siri API so that developers can have their apps work with Siri. So that's going to be very exciting. What else? We're going to see an iPhone 5 probably next September. I think Apple likes launching the iPhone in October or September because it's like right before Christmas. And it's going to be redesigned. That's my guess. We have the iPhone and iPhone 4S with a certain design, and then we're going to probably get something sleeker, more beautiful than the iPhone 4S, which is a beautiful phone. It's probably going to have a faster chip, the A6 chip probably. There isn't going to be what's known as 4G LTE. I don't think the technology is there in terms of battery life. Yeah, but there will probably be a better camera. They keep improving the camera. So, that's some of the stuff that I think we'll see. Okay, so finally, another thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of in 2012 are Thunderbolt devices. Now, Thunderbolt is this great connection in all the new Macs, which has incredible speed. Like, it has incredible potential. You can go up to 10 gigabytes of data, and also can power a Mac through that port. And so it's the port for everything. And unfortunately, right now, there's not a lot of things that can connect to it and use it. Apple has a $1,000 Apple Display Thunderbolt monitor. So if you get like a MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, you can hook it up to this display, and then the display has FireWire connections and other connections, and they all sort of merge through the Thunderbolt connection. But right now, there's not a lot of like external hard drives that work with Thunderbolt. There are these very expensive, almost like $1,000 or $600 hard drives. But what we need in 2012 are lots of third-party connections. Blackmagic makes this Thunderbolt device that connects right now I don't know if it's actually shipping, but it would allow you to capture video, let's say through an HDMI connection by connecting it to this Black Magic device through Thunderbolt. But I'd like to see more and more Thunderbolt devices. I mean, what I'd like to see are enclosures that use Thunderbolt and that also can contain, let's say, a 6G SSD drive. Now, these SSD drives, Otherworld Computer sells these SSD drives that are 6G, and they can read and write data like at 500 megabits per second, which is really, really, really fast. And if you had it connecting, I guess, through a Thunderbolt connection to a MacBook Air, you could have just a really fast hard drive externally. And I was thinking about this. Apple could just make like a hard drive that's really fast SSD connected with Thunderbolt. And you could just put your operating system, that could be like your computer. And the thing is, you could just take it to various Macs that have Thunderbolt on them and essentially launch your computer through the Thunderbolt. In other words, boot the external Thunderbolt drive. And that would be like your hyperportable Mac. In other words, just an SSD drive. Because Thunderbolt is so fast, you no longer have to think about, hey, your operating system has to be internally on a Mac. With Thunderbolt, you could have the guts of your computer, in other words, the operating system, on an external, highly portable SSD drive that's got a Thunderbolt connection. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, see, Thunderbolt really makes everything really upgradable, too. If you think about it, like where I work, we got some brand new MacBook Pros, and they have Thunderbolt connections, but they have internally, historic regular hard drives. So they're not really, really fast. But like if somebody made one of these external SSD drives that work with Thunderbolt, you could just connect one of these drives externally to it and have a really, really fast MacBook Pro booting. So, I just hope that we'll see lots of third-party Thunderbolt devices. I think that's what we need in 2012, and I think it's going to come. Particularly, I read somewhere that Intel is going to be launching this in the Windows world in March. So a lot of Windows computers in March are going to start having Thunderbolt connections. And so it's going to become a greater sort of standard. Now, speaking of the Apple TV, word comes from the website Engadget that there's a very cool untethered jailbreak for the Apple TV, something called Season on Pass. Basically, it's a tool that allows you to do an untethered jailbreak of an Apple TV, which then allows you to put, I guess, apps on it. And it says here, even interestingly, a few hackers may be close to unlocking iOS apps for use on the Apple TV. So you might be able to just sort of take your iOS apps and just put them on the Apple TV. I don't know how well that will work. And there's a video showing how the apps are running on the Apple TV, like a calculator app. And I don't know, do we really want that? I mean, I think if you can think of doing it, it kind of makes sense. So, if you've got an Apple TV too, and you want to sort of, do something risky and try a hack, you might want to check it out. I have a link to the Engadget site, which then has links to where you can do this untethered jailbreak for the Apple TV. So check it out. Now, Apple's is filing patents, and they sort of inspire you to think about what Apple's going to do in the future that's really kind of innovative. And one patent that they filed, tomsguide.com reported on, and it's basically Apple has an idea for fuel cell battery that would last for weeks. And it says here, claiming to have determined a way to eliminate the need for a bulky and heavy battery, Apple has made public 2 patent proposals originally filed in 2010 that combined would enable the manufacture of fuel cell batteries that could boost the life of a handheld device by a matter of weeks. So that's pretty wild. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, batteries really are the sort of bane of a lot of people's existence because you're constantly worried if you have enough power. One of the things that makes the iPad just such a huge hit is that the battery lasts an incredibly long time, like 10, 11 hours. And you really notice the difference when you compare the MacBook Air, the 11-inch, which is about the same size as an iPad or a little not that much heavier, and the MacBook Air just goes through power very quickly. I mean, if you're lucky, it lasts like 2-3 hours, like while you're using it. While the iPad, you could be using it straight for 10, 11 hours. So this patent, would be huge if Apple can implement something like this. A fuel cell battery that lasted weeks. It would be a gigantic breakthrough in consumer devices, and Apple would have a sort of a lock. I mean, if you could get an iPhone where the battery lasted weeks, would you buy then an Android phone if it didn't have that technology? So I think this is really exciting stuff, and I don't know, hopefully in a couple of years we'll see it. Okay, one of the more funnier stories this holiday season is in ComputerWorld.com, entitled U.S. Teen Fury at Apple iPhone iPad Gift No-Show. And I saw this on other websites too, and apparently a lot of kids were furious that they didn't get the iPhone or iPod Touch or iPad that they wanted. And in this article, it talks about how, one comedian, John Hendren, captured unhappy tweets from teenagers who didn't get an iPhone or iPad. And I saw some of these tweets, and the kids were like, I hate you, Santa, or I hate, their parents for like they didn't get like the iPhone, and they're very upset. And it just shows you how popular these devices are. And then apparently somebody, singer-songwriter Jonathon Mann, turned the tweets from all the unhappy kids into a song, called WTF, I Wanted an iPhone Song. And I've listened to it. It's pretty funny. So if you go to the link for the ComputerWorld.com story, you'll see the YouTube video of the song. So, it is kind of funny that it's so popular that when kids don't get it, they just sort of rant and rave. But it just shows you how popular this stuff is. Okay, so one of the things that Apple recently did was put more detail on how iTunes Match works. And they have a dedicated page on apple.com, which gives a little more explanation. Basically, look, I'll explain it. You go into your iTunes account on your computer, and you can enable iTunes Match, and you have to pay $25 a year. And once you do that, it will scan your library of like MP3s that you have on your computer. And if it notices that it has, like let's say you have some Rolling Stones music, and it's the same Rolling Stone music, songs that Apple has in its iTunes library, Apple will then make them available in your account without you having to upload them. And so what Apple does, it gives you higher quality DRM-free 256 kilobytes per second AAC files. So even if you had a lower quality MP3 of, let's say, of that Rolling Stones song, you don't have to upload it. You're going to have this higher quality in the iCloud in iTunes Match. So that's basically how it works. And once it's up there, you then can enable your iOS device and Apple TV to work with iTunes Match. So you go into your music settings, let's say if you have it on the iPhone, and you say put on iTunes Match, and then all you have to do is sort of put in your password and your Apple name, and suddenly all that music in the cloud is now available on your iPhone. And the way it works is, if you play it, it'll download. You need an internet connection, and it'll download to your phone. But you'll see whatever is available in the cloud. And what's nice is there's a little button you can toggle that says, no, don't show me everything that I have in iTunes Match, just show me what I have on my phone. And that way you can see what's really locally stored on your phone. But it's a very handy feature for suddenly accessing all your music. Now, one of the things that really bugs me about iTunes Match is that it's limited to 25,000 songs. Now, that would be sort of okay if you could still use it with your 50,000 song library. Let's say Apple basically said, oh, we're only going to let you upload 25,000, we're going to only let you have 25,000 songs in your iTunes Match account, so you select which out of your 50,000, let's say, or 40,000 you want up there. But Apple doesn't do that. Apple won't let you even turn on iTunes Match if you have more than 25,000 songs. So I have a friend who wanted to, was excited recently to do iTunes Match, and he just couldn't do it because it noticed he had more than 25,000 songs. Now, there is a workaround, but it's kind of a hack, and everyday people don't know how to do it. And what I did was I had, way more than 25,000 songs. So I created a duplicate, an empty iTunes library. I called it iTunes Match. And then I imported into that, I added to that iTunes Match library various albums from the other iTunes library. In other words, I knew where the actual music folders were with the MP3s, and I brought them over in groups. And what I did was I could see what was matching, and whatever wasn't matching, I would delete out of iTunes Match library that I had, and then bring over some more to see what would match, and then essentially matched up to 25,000. And the beauty is, once I closed out that library, and even if I launched my old iTunes library, I didn't put on Match on my old iTunes library, but I still had all that music up in the cloud working with my iOS devices. So it's a nice workaround. But if you're looking for more detail on how iTunes Match works, I have the link to the Apple site. Okay, so I was able to get through episode 102 of the Apple podcast. Thanks for listening. This is a chit-chat-free podcast, all about Apple stuff. And this is Lex at Max Future. Have a great new year. See you in the coming new year, and there'll be a lot of interesting Apple stuff. So thanks for listening. And if you want to support this podcast, any positive feedback in the iTunes Store or on YouTube or on Blip TV would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening.
This has been a Max Future production.